The night was quiet when Richard pulled his car into the underground parking garage. It was almost midnight, and he was exhausted from another long business dinner that had stretched way past closing time. These days, everything in his life felt like it was running on autopilot. Work, meetings, more work, and then coming home to an empty house. Well, not completely empty. His baby daughter was there, and so was the woman who took care of his home. Richard took the elevator up to his penthouse apartment, loosening his tie as the floors ticked by. The lights were dimmed when he stepped inside, just how he liked it when he came home late. He expected everything to be silent, everyone asleep, but as he walked down the hallway toward his bedroom, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. Crying. Soft, tired crying coming from the nursery. His heart jumped a little. His daughter, little Lily, had been having trouble sleeping lately. The doctor said it was colic, that some babies just went through this phase. But hearing her cry always made something twist in his chest. He was supposed to be this powerful businessman, someone who could solve million-dollar problems with a phone call, but he couldn't fix his own baby's discomfort. Richard changed direction and headed toward the nursery, moving quietly down the hall. The door was slightly open and a soft nightlight glowed from inside. He was about to push the door wider when he saw something that made him freeze completely. There on the hard wooden floor next to the crib was Grace, his housekeeper. She was lying curled up on her side with nothing but a thin blanket under her, and another one draped over her shoulders. Her arm was stretched up through the bars of the crib, and her hand was gently patting his daughter's back. She was humming something low and soft, a melody Richard didn't recognize, but that sounded like it came from somewhere deep and old. Richard stood there in the doorway, not moving, barely breathing. He watched as Grace kept humming, kept patting even though she looked completely exhausted. Her eyes were closed, but her hand never stopped its gentle rhythm. Lily's crying had softened to small whimpers, and as he watched, even those began to fade. For the first time in months, Richard really looked at the woman who worked in his home. Grace had been with them for about 3 months now. His wife, Victoria, had hired her before taking off on one of her long trips to Europe. Victoria was always traveling these days, always busy with what she called important social connections and business opportunities. Richard barely saw her anymore, and when he did, she seemed distant, distracted, like her mind was always somewhere else. Grace stirred slightly on the floor, and her eyes opened. It took her a second to focus in the dim light, but when she saw Richard standing in the doorway, she went completely still. Then, like someone had lit a fire under her, she scrambled to sit up. "Mr. Holloway, I'm so sorry," she whispered urgently, trying to keep her voice low so she wouldn't wake Lily, who had finally fallen asleep. "I didn't mean to. I was just..." The baby, she wouldn't stop crying, and I tried everything, I really did. Grace started to stand up, and Richard saw her wince. She put one hand on her lower back, and he could see the stiffness in the way she moved. How long had she been lying on that hard floor? "Please don't apologize," Richard said quietly, stepping into the room. What are you doing here? It's almost midnight." Grace looked embarrassed. She smoothed down her simple work dress and pushed a few strands of her dark hair back from her face. "I know, sir. I'm sorry. I should have left hours ago." But Lily, she started crying around 7, right after the day Nanny left, and she just wouldn't settle down. She'd calm for a few minutes if I held her, but the moment I put her back in the crib, she'd start up again. "So you've been here since 7? Richard looked at his watch. "That was almost 5 hours. "I tried everything," Grace continued, and Richard could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "I fed her, changed her, checked her temperature, walked with her, sang to her. Nothing worked for long, but then I noticed that if I lay down next to the crib where she could see me and feel me touching her, she'd calm down. So I stayed." Richard looked down at the thin blanket on the floor. "You've been sleeping on the floor?" Grace nodded, then quickly added, "Just tonight, sir. Well, just for a few hours. I was going to leave once she was deep asleep, I promise." Something about the way she said "just tonight" made Richard pause. There was something in her voice, a tiny hesitation that didn't quite ring true. He looked at her more carefully. There were dark circles under her eyes, the kind that didn't come from just one night of poor sleep. And now that he thought about it, he'd noticed she looked tired lately, but he'd been too wrapped up in his own problems to really pay attention. "Grace," he said slowly, "how many nights have you done this?" She looked away and Richard had his answer before she even spoke. It's not a problem, Mr. Holloway, really. I just want to make sure Lily is okay. She's such a sweet baby, and when she cries like that, I can't just leave her alone. That's not what I asked. Richard kept his voice gentle but firm. How many nights? Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then very softly she said, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a little more. But please don't worry about it. I'm managing just fine. 2 weeks. Richard felt something heavy settle in his stomach. This woman had been sleeping on his nursery floor for 2 weeks and he hadn't known. He came home late most nights, went straight to his room and left early in the morning. He'd been so caught up in work and avoiding his empty marriage and just getting through each day that he hadn't noticed. The day nanny, he said. Mrs. Chen, she leaves at 5? Yes, sir. That's her schedule. And my wife is in Paris. London, I think, sir. At least that's what she said last time she called. Richard didn't even know what city his own wife was in. He looked at his daughter sleeping peacefully now in her crib. Her tiny chest rose and fell with steady breaths. She looked so small, so helpless. And this woman, this housekeeper who was paid to clean and cook and manage his home, had been taking care of his child through the long nights without saying a word. You should have told me, Richard said quietly. I didn't want to bother you, sir. You're very busy, and I know you have a lot on your mind. Besides, it's really not a problem. I don't mind helping with Lily. You're sleeping on the floor, Grace. Your back is clearly hurting. How is that not a problem? Grace smiled a little, though she still looked tired. I've slept in worse places, Mr. Holloway. And Lily needed someone. I couldn't just let her cry alone all night. What kind of person would that make me? Richard didn't know what to say to that. He looked at this woman, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't expected. He saw kindness, real, genuine kindness that didn't ask for anything in return. How long had it been since he'd seen that? Go home, he said finally, please. Get some rest. Are you sure? I can stay if you need me to. In case Lily wakes up again, I'm her father. I think I can handle it if she wakes up. Grace nodded and gathered her thin blankets. As she moved toward the door, Richard stopped her with a question. Grace, do you have family? She turned back, looking surprised. Yes, sir. I have a daughter. She's 15. And you take 2 buses to get here? Yes, sir. Richard nodded slowly. Thank you. For taking care of Lily, really. Grace smiled, a real smile this time. She's easy to love, Mr. Holloway. Good night. After she left, Richard stood in the nursery for a long time, looking at his sleeping daughter. The thin blanket Grace had been lying on was still on the floor, a reminder of what had been happening in his own home while he'd been too busy, too distracted, too absent to notice. Something had shifted in him tonight. He didn't quite understand it yet, but he knew that things couldn't keep going the way they had been. Something had to change. The next morning, Richard did something he hadn't done in months. He came down to breakfast before leaving for work. Usually, he'd grab coffee on the way to the office, but today he wanted to see his home in the daylight, wanted to see what his life actually looked like when he wasn't rushing through it. Grace was in the kitchen, preparing bottles for Lily. She looked surprised to see him. Good morning. Mr. Holloway, I didn't expect you to be up so early. Would you like breakfast? Coffee is fine, thank you. Richard sat at the kitchen counter, something he couldn't remember doing before. He watched as Grace moved efficiently around the kitchen. She looked tired, but she was humming the same melody he'd heard last night. That song you were singing to Lily, he said. What is it? Grace smiled softly. It's an old lullaby my grandmother used to sing to me. She sang it to my mother, and my mother sang it to me. I sing it to my daughter, too. Well, I used to when she was little. Your daughter is 15, you said? Yes, sir. Her name is Amara. She's a good girl, smart as anything. She wants to be a doctor someday. Richard sipped his coffee. That's wonderful. She must be proud to have a mother like you. Grace looked at him strangely, as if she wasn't quite sure what to make of this conversation. Usually, their interactions were brief, professional. She'd tell him what needed to be done around the house, and he'd nod and leave for work. Over the next few days, Richard found himself changing his routine. He came home earlier. He spent time in the nursery learning how to care for Lily himself. And he watched. He paid attention to things he'd never noticed before. He saw that Grace arrived at 6 in the morning, a full hour before her official start time. He discovered she stayed until 8 or 9 most evenings, long after Mrs. Chen, the day nanny, had gone home. And yes, just as he'd suspected, she'd been sleeping on the nursery floor for weeks. Not just that one night. One evening he came home at 6 and found Grace in the nursery, swaying back and forth with Lily in her arms. The baby was fussing, that pre-cry whimper that usually turned into full screaming. But Grace just kept swaying, kept patting Lily's back in that rhythmic way she had. Does she do this every evening? Richard asked from the doorway. Grace turned, not looking startled this time. She was getting used to him being around. Most evenings, yes. Between 6 and 8 is usually her worst time. The doctors call it the witching hour. Some babies just get fussier as the day ends. And you stay with her through it. Someone needs to, sir. Richard stepped into the room. Let me try. Grace looked uncertain. Are you sure? She can be quite difficult to soothe. She's my daughter. I should know how to do this. Grace gently transferred Lily into Richard's arms, showing him how to support her head, how to hold her against his chest. The baby squirmed and fussed, and Richard felt panic rising. What was he doing? He didn't know how to do this. Just breathe, Grace said softly. She can feel your tension. Relax your shoulders. There you go. Now just sway, like you're dancing to slow music. That's it. Richard did as she instructed, slowly, awkwardly at first, but then finding a rhythm. Lily's crying softened slightly. It didn't stop, but it wasn't getting worse either. Talk to her, Grace encouraged. She likes to hear voices. What do I say? Anything. Tell her about your day. Tell her a story. It doesn't matter what. She just wants to know you're there. So Richard talked. He told Lily about a meeting he'd had, about the traffic on the way home, about how he'd noticed the leaves were starting to change color. It felt ridiculous at first, telling a 6-month-old baby about quarterly reports, but as he talked, Lily began to settle. Her cries turned to whimpers, then to silence. Her tiny body relaxed against his chest. You're a natural, Grace said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. I'm really not. I've been terrible at this. You're here now. That's what matters. Over the following week, Richard learned more about his household than he'd known in the entire year since Lily was born. He learned that Grace took 2 buses and a subway train to get to his apartment, leaving her own home at 5 in the morning. He learned that she'd been buying baby supplies out of her own pocket because she didn't want to bother him with small expenses. He learned that she'd been the one teaching Lily to grab toys, to track objects with her eyes, to smile in response to faces. He also learned about Grace herself. Piece by piece, during quiet moments in the evening when Lily was finally settled, Grace told him her story. She'd been a nurse once, working in a hospital emergency room. She'd loved that work, helping people, being there during their worst moments. But then her husband died. A car accident, sudden and senseless. He'd been on his way home from work and a drunk driver ran a red light. Just like that, he was gone. The medical bills from the accident, combined with funeral costs and the existing debt from her husband's business that had failed the year before, buried her. She had a 15-year-old daughter to raise, a mortgage to pay, and debt collectors calling every day. Nursing jobs paid decent money, but not enough to dig herself out of the hole fast enough. So she'd taken housekeeping jobs on the side, then eventually full-time because the hours were more flexible and she could work for multiple families. I always thought I'd go back to nursing, she told Richard one evening. They were sitting in the living room while Lily napped. I kept my license active, take the continuing education courses online when I can. But between working and taking care of Amara, there just isn't time. And honestly, the money isn't much different. Your wife pays me well for this job. Richard felt something twist in his stomach. His wife, Victoria. He needed to talk about Victoria. Can I ask you something? He said carefully. When was the last time my wife was here? Actually here in person? Grace thought about it. Maybe 6 weeks ago. She stayed for 2 days, then left for London. She's called a few times since then. 6 weeks. His wife hadn't seen their daughter in 6 weeks. And when she did call, she never asked about Lily. She talked about parties she'd attended, people she'd met, business deals she was exploring. Richard had stopped really listening to her calls. They felt like updates from a stranger. Does she ask about Lily when she calls you? Richard asked. Grace looked uncomfortable. Sometimes, sir. But mostly she asks about household things, whether things are running smoothly. Richard nodded slowly. He'd been suspecting for a while that something was deeply wrong with his marriage, but he'd been avoiding facing it. It was easier to work long hours, to pretend everything was fine, than to confront the truth that his wife had checked out of their life together. Grace, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Richard leaned forward. Do you think Mrs. Chen is doing a good job with Lily during the day? Grace hesitated. Richard could see her weighing her words carefully, not wanting to speak badly about someone else. Mrs. Chen is professional, Grace finally said. She keeps Lily fed and changed. She's not unkind, but she watches the clock, sir. The moment it hits 5, she's out the door. And she doesn't really engage with Lily. She keeps her safe, but she doesn't play with her much, doesn't talk to her. She mostly keeps her in the playpen and watches her phone. Richard felt anger rising, but he kept his voice calm. How long have you known this? Since I started, sir. But it wasn't my place to say anything. It absolutely was your place. Lily is a baby. She needs more than just being kept safe. I know, sir. That's why I started staying later. I wanted to make sure she got some attention, some love. Babies need that. They need to be held and played with and talked to. Without it, they don't develop properly. And there it was, the truth Richard had been avoiding. Grace had been raising his daughter because neither he nor his wife had been there to do it. Grace, who was paid to clean and cook, had taken on the role of mother because no one else would. I'm going to make some changes, Richard said. Starting tomorrow, I want you to start coming in at 8 instead of 6. And I don't want you staying past 6 in the evening unless there's an emergency. Grace looked alarmed. But Lily needs her father, Richard interrupted. I'll be here in the evenings. I'll handle the witching hour and bedtime. You have your own daughter who needs you at home. Mr. Holloway, are you sure? What about your work? Work can wait. Work has taken too much of my life already. I've missed 6 months of my daughter's life, and I'm not missing any more. Grace smiled, and Richard saw tears shining in her eyes. She's lucky to have you, sir. I'm lucky to have you, Richard corrected. You saved my daughter when I didn't even know she needed saving. I won't forget that. That night, after Grace left, Richard sat in the nursery and held Lily close. She was awake, her big eyes looking up at him with trust and curiosity. He thought about all the nights Grace had slept on the floor, all the hours she'd given without asking for anything in return. He thought about his wife off living some other life while their daughter grew without her, and he realized that something fundamental had shifted. He couldn't go back to the way things were. He didn't want to. For the first time in a long time, he wanted to be present in his own life. Richard kept his promise. The next day, he had the guest room next to the nursery completely redone. He brought in a comfortable bed, soft blankets, blackout curtains, everything Grace would need if she ever had to stay late with Lily. When Grace arrived for work and saw what he'd done, she actually teared up. Mr. Holloway, this is too much. I can't accept this. You're not accepting anything. This is my home. And if someone needs to stay with my daughter overnight, they're not sleeping on the floor. That's final. He also increased her salary by 40%. When Grace tried to refuse that too, Richard was firm. Grace, you've been doing the work of 3 people. A housekeeper, a night nurse, and half the job of being a parent. This isn't charity. This is me finally paying you what you're actually worth. But the biggest change was Richard himself. He started leaving work at 5 every single day. His assistant nearly fainted the first time he told her to cancel his evening meetings. His business partners complained. His board members raised eyebrows. Richard didn't care. Every evening at 6, he was home. He learned how to give Lily a bath, how to make her bottles just the right temperature, how to read the difference between her hungry cry and her tired cry. Grace taught him patiently, never making him feel stupid for not knowing things he probably should have learned months ago. Every parent learns at their own pace, she'd tell him when he got frustrated. You're doing great. The evenings became Richard's favorite time of day. He'd come home, take over from Grace, and spend hours with Lily. He'd play with her, talk to her, watch her discover her own hands like they were the most fascinating things in the world. Sometimes Grace would stay for a bit, and they'd chat while Lily played on her mat. That's how Richard learned more about Grace's daughter, Amara. Grace's face would light up whenever she talked about her. She's so smart, Mr. Holloway. Straight A's in every subject. She wants to study medicine, maybe become a pediatric surgeon. She's already volunteering at a free clinic on weekends just to get experience. I'm so proud of her. She sounds incredible. She must get that from you. Grace laughed. I don't know about that. She's always been special. Even when she was little, she'd take care of her stuffed animals like they were patients. She'd wrap them in bandages and give them pretend medicine. What school does she go to? Riverside Academy. It's a private school across town. The tuition is. Grace paused, and Richard could see the weight of it in her expression. It's a lot, but they gave her a partial scholarship, and I work extra jobs on weekends to cover the rest. It's worth it, though. She's getting opportunities I never had. Richard made a mental note of that. Riverside Academy, he knew that school. It was one of the best in the city, but it was expensive. Very expensive. 3 weeks into Richard's new routine, Victoria came home. She swept into the penthouse one Thursday afternoon with 6 suitcases and started talking before she even put her bags down. Richard, darling, you won't believe the opportunity that's come up. There's this amazing investor group in London, and they want to back a luxury lifestyle brand I've been developing. The parties I've been attending, the connections I've made, it's all finally paying off. This could be huge for us. Richard was sitting on the floor of the living room with Lily, helping her practice sitting up. He didn't stand up when Victoria entered. Hello, Victoria. Nice of you to come home. She barely glanced at Lily. Is that what you're wearing? Richard, you have carpet fuzz all over your pants. And why are you home so early? It's barely 6:30. I live here. This is my daughter. Where else would I be? Victoria kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch. You're in a mood. Is this about work? Did something happen with the company? No, Victoria. Work is fine. I'm just tired of pretending. Pretending what? Richard carefully picked up Lily and held her against his shoulder. Pretending that we have a marriage. Pretending that you care about this baby. Pretending that everything is normal. Victoria's expression shifted. Oh, not this again. Richard, we've discussed this. I'm building something important. Just because I'm not here changing diapers doesn't mean I don't care. I'm thinking about our future, about our lifestyle. Our lifestyle? Victoria, you haven't seen your daughter in almost 2 months. 2 months. Do you even know how much she's changed? She can sit up now. She laughs when you make funny faces at her. She started eating solid foods. But you wouldn't know any of that because you're never here. That's not fair. I call regularly. You call to check on the house, not on Lily. When was the last time you asked to video chat with her? When was the last time you asked how she was sleeping? What new things she's learning? Victoria stood up, her face flushing. I don't need this lecture from you. You're the one who was working 18-hour days until recently. At least I'm honest about pursuing my career. This isn't about career, Victoria. I work to support this family. You're in London going to parties. They're not just parties, they're networking events. God, you're so provincial. You don't understand how these things work. Grace appeared in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable. Excuse me, Mr. Holloway. I've finished preparing dinner. I can take Lily if you'd like. Victoria noticed Grace for the first time. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, you're still here? I thought I told you to leave by 5. I adjusted her hours, Richard said quickly. She stays until 6:30 now. Without consulting me? Richard, I hired her. I set her schedule. And when was the last time you were here to manage the household, Victoria? Grace has been running everything while you've been gone. She deserves some input into her schedule. Victoria crossed her arms. Speaking of Grace, the neighbors have been talking. Mrs. Patterson mentioned she saw the help sleeping in our guest room. That's completely inappropriate. Richard felt anger rising in his chest. That room is there in case Grace needs to stay overnight with Lily. And please don't call her the help. Her name is Grace. Fine, Grace, but really, Richard, she's overstepping. I've heard she's been acting like she's Lily's mother. That's not what we pay her for. Grace's face went pale. Mrs. Holloway, I would never presume Grace, don't. Richard interrupted. You have nothing to apologize for. He turned to Victoria. Grace has been more of a mother to Lily than you have. She's the one who comforts her when she cries. She's the one who was sleeping on the nursery floor for weeks because Lily wouldn't settle. Where were you? I was building our future. No, you were avoiding your responsibility. There's a difference. Victoria's voice went cold. I see what this is really about. You've developed some kind of inappropriate attachment to the housekeeper. That's ridiculous. Is it? You're defending her pretty strongly. You've given her a room in our home. You've changed her schedule without talking to me. What's next? Richard? Are you going to tell me you've fallen in love with her? Grace made a small sound and quickly left the room. Richard heard her footsteps hurrying down the hall. That was cruel, Victoria. Grace has done nothing wrong. She's been taking care of our daughter because neither of us was doing it properly. I'm trying to fix that. But you're not even here. Maybe I'm not here because there's nothing here for me anymore. Victoria's voice was sharp, cutting. This isn't the life I signed up for. I didn't get married to play house and change diapers. I have ambitions, Richard. I have dreams bigger than this apartment and this boring domestic life. Then what were the last year and a half about? The pregnancy, the baby, all of it? Victoria looked away. I thought I could do both. I thought I could have a family and still be myself. But I can't. Every time I'm here, I feel like I'm suffocating. Like my life is just getting smaller and smaller. Richard felt something crack inside him. Not his heart breaking, but something else. A realization settling into place. You regret having Lily. I don't. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Victoria, if you don't want to be here, then don't be here. But stop pretending, stop coming back for a day or two and acting like you're part of this family. It's confusing for everyone and it's not fair to Lily. So what are you saying? You want a divorce? I think we both know this marriage ended a long time ago. We've just been too scared or too proud to admit it. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost relieved. There's someone else. In London. I didn't plan it, but it happened. He understands what I want from life. He supports my ambitions. Richard nodded slowly. He wasn't even surprised. Maybe he'd known on some level. Does he know about Lily? He knows I have a daughter. He's fine with me having a life here too. A life here? Victoria, you don't have a life here. You have a husband you don't love and a daughter you don't want to raise. Let's just be honest about it. Tears formed in Victoria's eyes, but Richard couldn't tell if they were real or for show. I do love her. I do. I'm just not made to be the kind of mother who stays home and does lullabies and playdates. That doesn't make me a monster. No, it doesn't. But it does mean you need to make a choice. You can't have it both ways. Victoria wiped her eyes. So what happens now? Now we call lawyers. We figure out custody, finances, all of it. But Victoria, I'm going to fight for full custody of Lily. If you want to be part of her life, we can work out visits, but she needs stability. She needs someone who's actually here. The divorce process moved faster than Richard expected. Victoria didn't contest anything. She signed papers giving him full custody of Lily, took half of their liquid assets, and kept the apartment they owned in London. She was gone within 2 weeks, and the apartment felt lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. But Richard wasn't naive. He knew the hard part was just beginning. Being a single father with a demanding career wouldn't be easy. He'd need help. Real help. And he'd need to restructure his entire life. The first thing he did was sit down with Grace for a real conversation about her role in the household. I need to be honest with you, Richard said one morning over coffee. Lily was napping and the apartment was quiet. I can't do this alone. I need someone I can trust, someone who genuinely cares about Lily. I'd like to offer you a different position, not just as a housekeeper, but as a full-time nanny and household manager. Better pay, benefits, everything official and proper. Grace stirred her coffee slowly. Mr. Holloway, I appreciate this, but I need to be honest too. I've been thinking about going back to nursing. I miss it. I miss helping people, being in a hospital, using the skills I trained for years to develop. Richard's heart sank, but he tried not to show it. I understand. That makes sense, but, Grace continued, I also love Lily and I need the stability. Nursing shifts are unpredictable, and I need to be there for Amara too. So maybe we could find a middle ground? I could work for you full-time for now, but with the understanding that eventually I'd like to transition back to healthcare. Of course, whatever works for you. I don't want to hold you back from your dreams, Grace. She smiled. You're a good man, Mr. Holloway. Your daughter is lucky. As the weeks turned into months, Richard fell into a new rhythm. He'd wake up early with Lily, feed her breakfast, play with her for a bit, then hand her over to Grace before heading to work. He restructured his company responsibilities, delegating more to his management team and working from home 2 days a week. He left the office by 5 every day without exception. Evenings were his time with Lily. Bath time, dinner time, playtime, bedtime. He learned every inch of her personality. How she laughed when he made silly sounds. How she loved watching the birds outside the window. How she'd grab his finger and hold on tight, trusting him completely. Grace was always there, but she'd started stepping back more, letting Richard take the lead. She was teaching him, preparing him to be independent, and Richard was grateful for it. One Saturday afternoon, Grace brought her daughter Amara to the apartment for the first time. Richard had been curious to meet her, hearing so much about this brilliant girl who wanted to be a doctor. Amara was tall and slender, with her mother's eyes and a smile that lit up her whole face. She was a little shy at first, but when Lily crawled over to her and pulled on her shoe, Amara melted. Oh my goodness, she's so cute. Amara sat on the floor and started playing with Lily, making funny faces that had the baby giggling. Mom talks about her all the time. I felt like I already knew her. Your mom is pretty special, Richard said. You're lucky to have her. I know, Amara said simply. She's my hero. Richard made lunch for everyone, insisting that Grace relax for once. As they ate, he asked Amara about school. Mom says you want to study medicine? Amara's face brightened. Yes, sir. I want to be a pediatric surgeon. I love working with kids and I love science. It seems like the perfect combination. Have you started thinking about colleges? The brightness dimmed a little. I'm applying to a few places. But honestly, I'll probably go wherever gives me the best financial aid package. Pre-med is expensive and then medical school is even worse. I've been saving money from my part-time job, but it's not much. Richard saw Grace's face tighten. He knew this weighed on her, the knowledge that money might limit her daughter's future. What if money wasn't an issue? Richard asked carefully. Where would you want to go? Oh, that's easy. Johns Hopkins. Their pre-med program is incredible, and their medical school is ranked second in the country. But it's just a dream. The tuition alone is over $60,000 a year. Richard nodded, filing this information away. Later, after Grace and Amara had left, he sat down at his computer and did some research. Then he made some phone calls. 2 weeks later, Richard asked Grace to stay after work. He had something to discuss. I've been thinking, he said, choosing his words carefully, about Amara and her education. Grace looked worried. Mr. Holloway, if this is about her being here that day, I'm sorry. It won't happen again during work hours. No, that's not it at all. I loved meeting her. She's wonderful, Grace. You should be incredibly proud. Richard took a breath. I want to set up an education fund for her. For college and medical school. Full tuition, room and board, books, everything. Grace went very still. I'm sorry, what? It's not charity, Richard said quickly. Think of it as an investment. You've invested countless hours into my daughter, into my family. You've given us stability and love when we desperately needed it. This is my way of saying thank you and giving back. Mr. Holloway, I can't accept that. It's too much. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Grace, I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What good is it if I can't use it to help people who've helped me? Amara is brilliant. She deserves every opportunity to become the doctor she wants to be. Don't let pride stand in the way of her dreams. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Why would you do this for us? We're not your family. Aren't you, though? Richard said softly. You've been more family to me and Lily than some people who share our blood. Family isn't just about DNA, it's about who shows up, who cares, who loves unconditionally. That's you, Grace. She covered her face with her hands and cried. Richard waited, letting her process. Finally, she looked up at him. I don't know what to say except thank you. This changes everything for Amara. Everything. She's going to change the world someday. I'm just making sure she gets the chance. That evening, Richard called Grace and Amara over for dinner. When he told Amara about the education fund, the girl burst into tears and hugged him so hard he thought his ribs might crack. I'm going to make you proud, Mr. Holloway. I promise. I'm going to work so hard. I'm already proud of you, Richard said. Just promise me you'll enjoy the journey too. Medical school is intense, but remember to live a little along the way. After dinner, Amara played with Lily while Richard and Grace cleaned up in the kitchen. You know this means she'll probably cry every time she sees you now, Grace said, smiling through her own tears. I can live with that. Grace was quiet for a moment, then said, Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you happy? Really happy? I know the divorce was hard and being a single parent is exhausting. But are you okay? Richard thought about it. You know what? I actually am. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm living my real life instead of just going through the motions. I know who I am now. I'm Lily's dad. That's my most important job, my most important identity. Everything else is secondary. She's lucky to have figured that out so young. A lot of kids don't get that kind of attention from their parents. I was lucky to have someone show me what I was missing. If you hadn't been there, sleeping on that floor, caring for her when nobody else would, I might have missed the first years of her life entirely. You gave me a gift, Grace. You gave me my daughter. As the months continued to pass, Richard noticed something shifting. He looked forward to coming home not just to see Lily, but to see Grace too. He found himself wanting to tell her about his day. He noticed the way she laughed at his bad jokes. He appreciated the wisdom she shared about life, about resilience, about finding joy in small moments. It confused him at first. Was he just grateful? Was it just because she was the only adult he talked to regularly outside of work? Or was it something more? He didn't have answers yet. His divorce was barely finalized, and the last thing he wanted was to complicate the stable life they'd built for Lily. But he couldn't deny that Grace had become essential to him, not just as someone who helped with his daughter, but as a person he deeply admired and cared about. One evening, he was giving Lily a bath while Grace tidied up the bathroom. Lily was splashing and laughing, completely soaked and delighted with herself. She's got your smile, Grace said softly. Richard looked up at her. You think so? Definitely. That mischievous little grin. That's all you. Their eyes met and something passed between them. Something warm and uncertain and full of possibility. Neither of them said anything, but Richard felt his heart beat faster. Grace broke the eye contact first, busying herself with folding towels. I should probably get going. Amara has a big chemistry test tomorrow. I promised I'd help her study. Of course. Tell her good luck from me. After Grace left, Richard sat on the bathroom floor with Lily wrapped in a towel on his lap. What am I going to do? He whispered to his daughter. I think I'm falling for her. Is that crazy? Is it too soon? Too complicated? Lily just grabbed his nose and giggled, which wasn't exactly helpful but made him smile anyway. Richard knew he needed to be careful. Grace worked for him. She depended on him for her income. The power dynamic was complicated. The last thing he wanted was to make her uncomfortable or put her in an awkward position. 6 months passed and Lily's second birthday was approaching. Richard wanted to do something special, not just for Lily, but to celebrate how far they'd all come as a family. He planned a small party at the apartment, inviting a few of his colleagues, who had kids, some neighbors, and of course Grace and Amara. The morning of the party, Richard was in the kitchen trying to assemble a birthday cake he'd bravely attempted to bake himself. It was lopsided and the frosting looked more like a landslide than the smooth finish he'd seen in the tutorial video. Grace walked in, took one look at it, and started laughing. Oh no, it's that bad? Richard groaned. It's got character, Grace said diplomatically, still smiling. And Lily won't care. She'll just be excited to smash it. I wanted it to be perfect. Grace moved closer and gently took the frosting spatula from his hand. Here, let me show you a trick my grandmother taught me. She started smoothing the frosting with careful strokes, and somehow, miraculously, the cake started looking presentable. See? It's not about being perfect, it's about being made with love. That's what matters. Richard watched her work, and his heart did that thing it had been doing a lot lately. That skip, that warmth, that feeling of rightness. He'd been trying to ignore it, trying to convince himself it was just gratitude or loneliness or convenience. But standing there in his kitchen, watching Grace fix his terrible cake while humming softly to herself, he couldn't deny it anymore. He was in love with her. The party was chaotic and wonderful. Lily wore a little crown and got frosting everywhere. Kids ran around the apartment screaming with joy. Adults chatted and laughed. Amara helped serve cake and was so good with the younger kids that everyone kept asking if she was available for babysitting. As the afternoon wound down and guests started leaving, Richard found himself standing on the balcony looking out at the city. Grace joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing him one. "You read my mind. Thank you for everything today. You didn't have to help set up and clean and manage everything. It's your day off. I wanted to be here. Besides, I love a good party." She leaned against the railing. "Lily had a great time. Did you see her face when everyone sang happy birthday? Pure joy." "I did. I took about 100 photos." Richard paused, then said, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. A year ago, I would have paid someone to organize this party. I would have shown up, smiled for photos, and probably left early for a work call. I wouldn't have baked a cake, even a terrible one. I wouldn't have sat on the floor playing with kids for 3 hours. I wouldn't have even known what Lily would enjoy. But you're different now. Because of you. You changed everything, Grace. You showed me what actually matters." Grace looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Holloway, I didn't do anything special. I just took care of a baby who needed care." "Please stop calling me Mr. Holloway. We've been through too much together for that. My name is Richard." She smiled slightly. "Richard, then, but I still don't think I did anything extraordinary." "You did, though. You slept on a hard floor for weeks because a baby needed comfort. You gave up time with your own daughter to make sure mine wasn't alone. You taught me how to be a father. That's not nothing. That's everything." Grace was quiet for a moment. "You would have figured it out eventually." "Maybe. But I might have figured it out too late. Childhood is so short, I could have missed all of it." They stood in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee. Inside, they could hear Amara playing with Lily, making the toddler giggle. "I got offered a nursing position," Grace said suddenly, "at City General Hospital. Evening shift, 3 days a week. It would mean I couldn't be here those nights." Richard felt his stomach drop, but he kept his voice steady. "That's wonderful, Grace. Is it something you want to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to go back to nursing so badly. I miss it. I miss feeling like I'm making a real difference in the world." "You make a difference every single day." "It's different, though. Nursing was my calling, you know. I always thought I'd do it until I retired, but then life happened and I had to make different choices." She turned to look at him. "But I also love being here. I love Lily like she's my own. And I love the stability, the routine we've built. I don't want to disrupt that." Richard took a deep breath. This was it. He could play it safe, keep things professional, tell her to take the job and they'd figure it out. Or he could be honest. "What if there was another option?" he said carefully. "What do you mean?" "What if you didn't work for me anymore? What if instead you were just here? As part of the family, as someone who belongs here not because she's being paid but because this is her home too." Grace stared at him. "I don't understand what you're saying." Richard set down his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. "I'm saying that I have feelings for you, Grace. Real feelings. Not as my employee, not as my daughter's caretaker, but as a woman I've come to know and admire and care about deeply. And I think maybe, possibly, you might feel something similar. And if I'm completely wrong about that, please tell me now so I can apologize and we can pretend I never said anything." Grace's eyes had gone wide. "Richard, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know, because I can't keep pretending that you're just the person who works for me. You're so much more than that. You're the first person I want to tell when something good happens. You're who I think about when I'm trying to solve a problem. You make me laugh. You make me want to be better. And Lily adores you. We both do." "This is complicated," Grace said softly. "You're my employer. I depend on you for my income, for Amara's education fund. The power dynamic here is." "I know. I've thought about that constantly. That's why I'm not asking you to answer me right now. Take the nursing job if you want it. We'll figure out childcare. Or don't take it and stay working here, and we'll keep things exactly as they are. Whatever you decide. The education fund for Amara doesn't change. Your job doesn't change unless you want it to." I'm not trying to pressure you or manipulate you. I just needed to be honest about how I feel." Grace's eyes were shining with tears. "You're serious about this?" "Completely serious." "Richard, I'm a housekeeper. You're a billionaire. People will talk. They'll say horrible things. They'll say I was trying to trap you, that I used Lily to get to you. I don't care what people say. Do you?" She laughed, but it was shaky. "I should care. I should be sensible and realistic. But the truth is, I've been fighting these feelings for months. Every time I see you with Lily, every time you make her laugh or hold her when she's sad, I feel my heart do this stupid little flip. And I kept telling myself it was inappropriate, that I was being ridiculous, that you were my boss and nothing could ever happen." Richard's heart was racing. "And now? Now I'm terrified. Because I do have feelings for you. Strong feelings. But I'm also scared of what this means. How it changes everything. It doesn't have to change everything. Not the important things. We take it slow. We figure it out together. We put Lily first always. And if it doesn't work out, we handle it like adults and make sure she's protected." Grace wiped her eyes. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple at all. But the best things in life usually aren't." Richard reached out and gently took her hand. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to see where this goes. As equals. As partners. As two people who care about each other and want to build something real." Before Grace could answer, the balcony door slid open and Amara stuck her head out. "Mom, Lily just said your name." Well, she said Gay, but she was definitely trying to say Grace. "You have to come hear it." They both laughed, and the tension broke. Grace squeezed Richard's hand once, then let go. "We should go hear this." Inside, Lily was indeed babbling, "Gay, gay." And everyone was celebrating like she'd just given a presidential speech. Grace scooped her up and covered her face with kisses, and Lily giggled and said gay again. Richard stood back and watched them, his heart full. Whatever happened next, this moment was perfect. Later that evening, after the party was completely cleaned up and Amara had gone home, Grace lingered by the door. Richard walked her out, and they stood in the hallway, the space between them charged with everything that had been said. "I need some time," Grace said. "To think about everything, to talk to Amara, to figure out what I want. Take all the time you need. But Richard, thank you for being honest. Thank you for seeing me as more than just the help. That means more than you know. You were never just the help, Grace. From the very first night when I found you on that nursery floor, you were someone extraordinary." Grace smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I'll see you Monday?" "Monday." She started to leave, then turned back. Before Richard could say anything, she stepped forward and kissed him softly on the cheek. "Just so you know, I'm not scared of what people will say. I'm scared of how much I already love you and Lily. That's the terrifying part." Then she was gone, leaving Richard standing in the hallway with his hand pressed to his cheek and hope flooding through him. 3 months later, Richard came home from work to find Grace and Amara both in the apartment, cooking dinner together while Lily banged on pots with a wooden spoon. Grace had tack.